Now let's talk a bit about how we actually make these decisions around functions, when they should be separated out into their own smaller functions, and what our functions should look like when we're writing them on our own. This particular lecture is important for Project 2, where there'll be much less skeleton code than you had in your first project, the Hog project. And it'll be important for you to make these decisions around how to design your functions and how big they should be on your own. So, some of the questions we want to answer are, what should a function's parameters be when we're designing a function on our own? And when is a task or problem sufficiently complex or independent such that it merits being put into its own function? So, when should we take some sort of task and pull it out into its own function? When does that make sense? So, some answers to this, some guidelines are, a function should be solving one problem. You should be able to reasonably sense about a single problem that your function is solving. And this may sound vague, but we'll go into an example in a minute. A function should also aim to have the smallest number of parameters possible to solve its problem. So when you can, given two otherwise equal choices, you should be erring on the side of having fewer parameters. And finally, if you have repeated sequences of code in your function or in multiple different parts of your program, that's an indication that that repeated sequence should be pulled out into its own function. There are several reasons for this, and one is, let's say you want to make a change to that sequence of code. If a change happens and now you need to change how the calculation is made in that sequence of code, if that code exists in multiple different parts of your program, you need to make that change X number of times, however many number of times that sequence is repeated. So ultimately, it's useful to just pull repeated sequences of code out into their own function, because then you only need to make changes once, rather than 10 times if that sequence is repeated 10 times.